Everyone, and welcome to The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the program. Canada's next Prime Minister, Mark Carney, already vowing to win the trade war with the United States. Ahead of that meeting between U.S. and Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia, U.S. President says Ukraine may not survive the conflict with Russia. Plus, it's been a tough few days in Syria, where fighting in communities have killed almost 1,000 people. Let's begin The World Today. He will become Canada's next Prime Minister, a newcomer to politics and one who's not afraid of U.S. President Donald Trump. Talking about Mark Carney, the man getting ready to be sworn in as Canada's new Prime Minister. Carney was given a speech to Canadians Sunday evening, warming them up in support of Canada, saying Canada is Canada strong. A former Bank of England boss won a landslide victory on Sunday, 85.9% of votes, to become leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. He'll be replacing Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister in the coming days. In his victory speech, he promised to face down the threats of tariffs from Donald Trump.
There's someone who's trying to weaken our economy. Donald Trump. Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living. He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed. And we won't. We won't. I am proud of the response of Canadians who are making their voices heard and their wallets felt. I am grateful for how our provinces are stepping up to the fight, because when we are united, we are Canada strong. The Canadian government has rightly retaliated and is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada. And my government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect. The Americans want our resources, our water, our land, our country. Think about it. If they succeeded, they would destroy our way of life. In America, health care is a big business. In Canada, it is a right. Thank you. America is a melting pot. Canada is a mosaic. America is not Canada. And Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form. Look. We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't ask for this fight. But Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves.
Carney is expected to be sworn in as Prime Minister in the coming days, as we mentioned earlier. He will then stand for the Liberals in the next general election that has to be called on by October 20. It's widely believed that Carney will want to capitalize on last night's momentum and it could call the general elections within weeks now. In the meantime, the U.S. president refusing to admit the economy is in recession or price rises in the wake of his administration's changes to tariff threats against some of its closest trading partners. Donald Trump instead says there's a period of transition taking place in the United States. It comes after a volatile week for U.S. financial markets as investors grapple with uncertainty from his administration's U-turn on some key parts of its aggressive trade policies. The new tit-for-tat tariffs from China, which target some U.S. farm products, come into effect today. Speaking to Fox News in an interview broadcast on Sunday but recorded on Thursday, Trump responded to a question about a recession, saying, "I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing." Trump's words. Last week, the U.S. imposed a new 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada, but then exempted many of those goods just 2 days later. Trump also doubled a blanket tariff on goods from China to 20%. In response, Beijing has announced retaliatory taxes on some imports of agricultural goods from the U.S. Now, from today, certain U.S. farm products going into China, including chicken, beef, pork, wheat, and soybeans, all face new tariffs of 10 to 15%. Staying with the tariffs by the United States, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has announced details of an agreement reached with Donald Trump's government during an informational assembly that was held in Zocalo Square in Mexico City earlier today. In her speech, the president celebrated the suspension of Trump's 25% tariffs on imports, claiming that dialogue had prevailed over the threat from the United States and Trump's aggressive economic plans, adding that in negotiations, mutual respect between the two nations have been maintained. In her words, "We're not extremists, but we are very clear about our non-negotiable principles. We cannot compromise our sovereignty, nor can our people suffer harm from decisions made by foreign governments or hegemonies. In such cases, we will always act immediately." Addressing thousands, accompanied by governors of Mexico's states, representatives of the legislative branch, and government ministers, Sheinbaum called on the Mexican people to remain vigilant and united. The Mexican president even proposed expanding the treaty between Mexico, the United States, and Canada to encompass the entire American continent. Let's discuss this now. Joining us is International Affairs Analyst Dr. Charles Chukwunaru. He's in Calgary, Canada. Dr. Chukwunaru, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Amarachi. Thank you for having me, even though the notice period was very short.
Well, I guess congratulations are in order. You do have a new prime minister, and interestingly, he is quite a hardliner, just like Justin Trudeau, who gave his toughest speech ever, I would say, the last time when the trade tariffs were announced by the U.S. last week. Now you have Mark Carney also towing the same line, saying, you know, Canada will stand strong against the United States. They will face tariff for tariff until America learns to respect Canada. What do you make of these words? Are they the feelings in Canada as well?
Well, Canadians are united. In fact, I've never seen Canadians being as united as they are right now. In my opinion, this is the best time for Canadians because the Canadian economy has been tied to the U.S. economy for a very, very long time. And that limits what Canada can do, what Canadians can do as Canadians. The level of nationalism in Canada that is being witnessed right now is unprecedented. I've never seen that since I arrived in Canada. The new or the incoming Prime Minister, fortunately, is continuing from where Justin Trudeau stopped. It's the same party, the same liberal government. So nothing is going to change. The U.S. made well, according to the Wall Street, and the outgoing Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, it was a dumb thing. It was a dumb policy. It's a mistake which the Trump-led administration had done in the United States of America by fighting their closest friend, their closest ally. And the funny thing here is people find it difficult to understand why the US president is doing it. The Canadian economy and the economy of the United States of America is interwoven, it's intertwined. There's no way you can separate them without causing serious havoc on trade and supply chains in both countries. Take, for instance, in the auto industry, before you manufacture one truck, one Dodge Silverado truck, for instance, a truck, it passes across the Canadian and US borders up to 4 times. The aluminium for the piston, for instance, is sourced from Canada, sent to a factory in the US that turns it into a piston, comes back to Canada where it's put in the engine. The engine goes back to US where it is put in the car, and it comes back to Canada where it is finished and goes back to the US to be sold. How many times will you impose that? It's unimaginable. That was why Trump hastily said he's putting a pause on the tariff because it is unworkable. One day, 24 hours into Trump's tariff on Canada, which was sweeping, which included auto, the price of a brand new Dodge truck jumped from 80,000 to 100,000 US dollars. In one day, the stock market started going down. And of course, he listened to the stock. It is the only language, the only phenomenon that can discipline Donald Trump is the stock market. He doesn't listen to anybody because he prides himself as the biggest deal maker. He prides himself as the best thing that happened to the stock exchange in the US. But 24 hours after this announcement, the S&P started going down, the NASDAQ, the stock was going down. He had to quickly announce that he's pausing it. But Canada said no. Well, you can go ahead and pause it. But what we have on the table, the $30 billion tariff on US goods stands. Canada is not pausing theirs. It's either you take the whole tariff threat, the whole tariff war completely out of the table or not. So right now, US has paused. US is saying, no, we are not. Canada is saying we are not pausing. Because the uncertainty is too much. No country can live by your closest neighbor. You can wake up one morning and say something. Well, the US president has to be taught a lesson, and Canada is teaching Donald Trump the lesson on political economy.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, scenario. I find that President Trump, his 47th run in the White House, his tenure as 47th president, he's made policies, he's rescinded, he has suspended, and I just wonder the kind of person that he is. And I know that some Canadian politicians already think that, the tariffs against Canada, which he blames on, the fight against fentanyl and drugs and, illegal immigration into the U.S., Canada says these things don't hold water because they have the lowest numbers both ways, whether for fentanyl and also for the illegal immigration. But some analysts and a lot of people in Canada seem to think that this is all part of Trump's plan to make Canada the 51st state of the United States. Do you think this is the road to his ambition?
Yeah, you're right. The fentanyl and then illegal immigration story is fake because more people migrate coming from Canada, more people coming from US to Canada illegally than people going the other way. And of course, it's you don't need, it's a known fact that the US is the highest exporter of drugs and guns in the whole world. And in fact, the quantity of fentanyl moving from Canada to US is zero. It's been reduced to about 0.6% of that. It's negligible compared to what is coming from America to Canada. It's just a ploy to weaken the Canadian economy because he has interest in annexing Canada as a 51st state. People thought he was joking. He is serious. He's a deal man. He sees Canada. When Donald Trump looks at Canada, just like Panama, just like Greenland, he doesn't see people. He sees vast resources. He sees oil, gas, rare earths, gold. In fact, Canada is the most endowed country in the world. Vast mineral resources, but very less people, very low human population. So when Trump looks at Canada, he sees mineral resources, he sees aluminum, he sees lithium, he sees crude, he sees everything that will make the US great. But he's going about it the wrong way. In fact, what has happened in Canada right now, he's achieving the opposite of what he intended. Oh, Canada, the true north, free and strong, has been echoing everywhere. In fact, he has awakening the kind of nationalism that I never knew existed in Canada. So what Donald Trump is doing is counterproductive. That's no way to go about it. Those who came before him used soft power. Donald Trump does not understand politics at all. He thinks politics is real estate. He does not understand political economy and international political economy. He doesn't understand that whereas business is a zero-sum game, it is win or lose. Political economy, politics is a win-win situation. Otherwise, you have conflict. He doesn't understand. The only way you can get a country like Canada to become part of US, it's not by force. It's not by mere proclamation. It's a long-term process. It's something you can do with soft power. You can't do that with intimidation. You cannot intimidate Canadians. Canadians are one of the most nationalistic, proud, and very polite people in the world. You can't intimidate a Canadian. Trump should go and look at the history books. The time America tried to annex Canada, what happened? The Canadians fought, even with the small population, they fought fiercely. They headed towards Washington before a truce was called. This was about a century ago. If you could not annex Canada by force over a century ago, can you do it now? Of course you cannot. Trump is dumb when you talk about politics. He does not understand the politics of win-win. For him, it is win or lose. This is not business. Business, although business and economics are two sides of the coin, where economics is a substructure and politics is a superstructure. The substructure is a phenomenon of the superstructure.
Yeah, so while he's thinking about, what tariffs and, the impact of this, especially on U.S. goods, which seem to be on the receiving end, with the impacts of the tariffs. Tariffs have also been announced or suspended on some Chinese goods coming into the U.S., but China has imposed tariffs on certain Canadian goods as well. What would you say about Canada-China relations at this point?
Okay, talking about China, we're moving from US to China. Okay, so in the fairness to China, I often don't agree with China because of their human rights records. But in this time, I don't blame China. Canada followed US and Europe and imposed 100% tariff on electric vehicles coming from China and 25% on some other products. So it was a Western driven policy against China because of the invasion of the Western market by Chinese electronics. But the Chinese are manufacturers of the cheapest and most efficient electric vehicles in the world. And it's beating Tesla, it's beating the Europe-made electronic vehicles. So the Western-made electronic vehicles. So US, Europe, and Canada imposed 100% tariff on electric vehicles coming from China, and increase about 25% on other products. So agricultural products. So what China did is just a retaliatory. In fact, what US is trying to do to Canada now is what Canada did to China. I think it was announced in August and it came into effect, I think, in October last year. So China is just retaliating now. So that's a different. It's different from what Trump is doing. Well, I hope China will rethink it, but Canada will be rethinking its relationship with China right now, because if this has happened, with what has happened now, if it had happened last year, I'm not sure Canada would have imposed that tariff. So the tariff, the tariff China imposed on Canada right now is a retaliation. It's a retaliatory tariff. It's a reciprocal tariff. Because Canada started it last year. It was announced in August. It came into effect. But it was not only Canada, US, and the EU imposed this tariff. So it's just a reciprocal, which I think Canada should be rethinking fast by now.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Chukwunaru. A pleasure speaking with you. We never seem to have enough time for these discussions, do we? Thanks for joining us on The World today.
I thought we were going to talk about the effect of. I'm still passionate about Ukraine. What is going on?
I understand, and as a humanitarian, I know that you really want to jump on the Ukraine discussion, but another time, of course, you will always have.
I also want to talk about the impact. I also wish to talk about the impact of what Trump is doing on the relationship between US and its Western allies. What he's doing to the Pax Americana. What has happened to the peace we have enjoyed since 1945 as a result of Pax Americana. The fact that Donald Trump is trying to destroy the new world order and the rule-based international system, which was established by the US, which has guaranteed international peace and security. One man comes from nowhere and wants to destroy everything. Does he want another war, world war?
I think we'll have to look into, the psychology of Donald Trump. That would be a really interesting topic to discuss in as soon as possible.
It would be interesting because some people really believe that there is now a KGB agent in the White House.
That is debatable. That hasn't been confirmed. But thank you again for joining us on the program. We'll invite you again to continue this conversation about U.S.-Canada relations, as well as the U.S. president's plans for Ukraine and the war there initiated by Russia. Thank you again for joining us on the program.
Always a pleasure, Marachi. Thanks for having me. But next time, give me enough time, okay?
Welcome back to The World Today. We're in the Middle East now, as U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff says Washington expects substantial progress to be made during talks with Ukraine this week, and that intelligence sharing will be discussed. And the U.S. hopes to sign a deal on critical minerals at the talks in Saudi Arabia this week. Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mark Waltz are due to arrive in Jeddah for Tuesday's talks with their Ukrainian counterparts. President Trump has stepped up pressure on his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky to accept his demands for a quick ceasefire with Moscow, but without any immediate pledge of a U.S. security guarantee. Well, Trump still has an opinion about Ukraine, this time about the war itself and who would most likely win. Trump says the U.S. has just about lifted its suspension of intelligence sharing with Ukraine, but he told Fox News that Ukraine may not survive the conflict with Russia even with U.S. support. It comes after Washington paused military aid and intelligence sharing with Kyiv last Wednesday. Trump later announced that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had written a letter to him expressing his desire to continue peace talks and negotiations for a minerals deal. U.S. officials are set to meet with the Ukrainian delegation in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. They'll be discussing Ukraine's potential concessions to Russia and the future of the minerals deal with Kyiv. will remain in Europe for just a bit. A British diplomat and the spouse of another diplomat are being expelled from Russia. That's according to the country's domestic security service in what has been seen as the latest tit-for-tat escalation. Both men are accused of intelligence and subversive work by the Federal Security Service, which said they'd been stripped of their accreditation and ordered to leave Russia within 2 weeks. The UK Foreign Office says this is not the first time Russia has made malicious and baseless accusations against our staff. Just last month, the UK expelled a Russian diplomat, an action taken in response to Moscow's expulsion of a British diplomat in November of 2024. A little politics. Romanian far-right populist Călin Georgiu has been barred from participating in May's presidential election rerun by the country's Central Electoral Bureau, triggering clashes between his supporters and the police. Last year, Romania's Constitutional Court annulled November's first round of the vote, in which he came first after intelligence revealed Russia had been involved in 800 TikTok accounts backing him. The BEC rejected his candidacy on Sunday, saying it does not meet the conditions of legality as he violated the very obligation to defend democracy. Meanwhile, hundreds of flights have been cancelled across Germany as airport workers stage a nationwide strike over pay, posing a major disruption for air travelers. The industrial action led by the trade union Verdi began unexpectedly on Sunday at Hamburg Airport before expanding to a nationwide strike. Passengers at Frankfurt, Munich, Berlin and other major hubs have been urged not to travel to airports, with operations severely disrupted. Frankfurt, Germany's busiest airport, said passengers would be unable to board flights and transfer would almost certainly be affected. Verdi, which represents public sector and transport workers, is in an ongoing dispute over wages and working conditions. 37 people have been brought ashore after a cargo vessel collided with an oil tanker. The owner of the tanker says jet fuel is spilling into the North Sea following the collision off the East Yorkshire coast. One person is in hospital. 36 others across both crews are safe and accounted for. Both ships involved are the oil tanker MV Stena Immaculate and a cargo ship called Solong. The Immaculate was carrying jet fuel. The company that owns the ship says this is now leaking into the sea. All of the crew from the Immaculate have been rescued safely. There were more than 20 people on board. And happening in the UK, the Home Secretary has rejected calls from the family of Member of Parliament, Sir David Amess, for a public inquiry into his murder. In a letter addressed to Lady Julia Amess and Katie Amess, Yvette Cooper said it was hard to see how any inquiry would be able to go beyond killer Ali Harbi Ali's trial, and recently published Prevent Learning Review. Katie Amess, daughter of Sir David, said Cooper's words were adding salt onto an open wound, branding them unacceptable and insulting. Sir David, the Conservative MP for Southend West, was stabbed to death by Ali, a fanatic of so-called Islamic State, at a constituency surgery on October 15, 2021. His widow, Lady Amess, said Sir Keir Starmer should go away and reconsider the government's position ahead of the family's meeting with the Prime Minister and Home Secretary on Wednesday. A Syria's interim leader has appealed for unity as violence and revenge killings continue in areas loyal to ousted leader Bashar al-Assad. Hundreds of people have reportedly fled their homes in the coastal provinces of Latakia and Tartus, strongholds of the Assad regime. Local residents have described the scenes of looting and mass killings, including children. In High Al-Qusur, a predominantly Alawite neighborhood in the coastal city of Banias, residents say the streets are filled with scattered bodies, piled up and covered in blood. Men of different ages have been shot dead there, according to witnesses. Clashes in recent days in Syria has been drawing international attention. There have been reports of clashes between government forces and those still loyal to the ousted Bashar al-Assad regime. The violence has taken the lives of over 1,000 people, with more than 700 civilians from the Alawite minority, including women and children, among the dead. Numbers corroborated by the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. It is unclear which groups are involved in the killing of civilians, with reports of different militias converging in the area. Much remains unknown about what is unfolding in Syria. The violence has been concentrated in the coastal areas of Tartus and Latakia, the home of the Alawite community, a small Islamic sect to which the Assad family belongs. The Syrian presidency, led by Ahmed al-Sharaa, has announced the creation of a new committee which will investigate and identify the perpetrators behind the attacks on civilians in the past few days. The committee will comprise 7 members and will be independent. Al-Sharaa has also called for peace, saying, "We must preserve the national unity and civil peace as much as possible." Leaders around the world have begun reacting to the news of the killings. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Syrian authorities must hold the perpetrators of these massacres accountable. He released a statement saying the United States condemns the radical Islamist terrorists, including foreign jihadists, that murdered people in Syria in the past days. He also noted that the United States stands with Syria's religious and ethnic minorities, including its Christian, Druze, Alawite, and Kurdish communities, and offers its condolences to the victims and their families. Adding their voices in condemning the violence, UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy said in a post on X that reports that large numbers of civilians have been killed in coastal areas in Syria in ongoing violence are horrific, adding that authorities in Damascus must protect all civilians and set out a clear path to transitional justice. The European Union released a statement condemning the attacks by what it called pro-Assad elements on interim government forces. It called on all external actors to fully respect the sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity of Syria. France joined in condemning the violence as well and called for an independent investigation into the recent killings. The UN's human rights chief, Volker Turk, urged the country's new leaders to take swift actions to protect civilians. In the meantime, people are growing impatient and have now taken to the streets, taken sides for and against the interim government. Well, hundreds of protesters gathered in Berlin on Sunday to condemn the clashes happening in Syria and the reported killing of members of the Alawite minority by government forces. Demonstrators held photos of alleged victims and placards with slogans such as "Stop the Massacre of Minorities," "Terrorists do not change." One protester said that Syrian authorities hold the responsibility. This authority made promises to provide security to all Syrians, but unfortunately, the tragedy was with the presence of criminal factions who moved to the coastal areas under the pretext of fighting the remnants of the regime. They entered homes on the coast and killed women, children, and elderly people who cannot be remnants of the former regime. Protesters called for justice and demanded that the Syrian government, led by President Ahmed al-Sharaa, hold perpetrators accountable for the violence. Speaking of which, Syria's leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, has vowed to hold anyone involved in harming civilians accountable following the days of fighting that started on Thursday, where Syrian security forces allegedly killed hundreds of civilians from the Alawite religious minority. At least 1,000 people have been killed in massacres targeting Alawites on the West Coast on Friday and Saturday. Much of what we've been hearing and reporting have been hard to verify because of how fluid the situation is. The death toll, however, is at 1,000 so far. This is what the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is counting, and as we believe, is the worst of the violence since the fall of the Assad regime. In a speech broadcast on national TV and posted also on social media, al-Shura, whose rebel movement toppled Bashar al-Assad in December, promised to hunt down those Assad loyalists. I want to bring in now data analyst Adetomiwa Adetilewa. He joins us from Chicago in the United States, a keen and commentator on foreign news and foreign issues. Adetomiwa, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm good, and you? So, there's lots of confusion on the ground about what really is going on in Syria, and I think that this much we know, that the remnants of the Assad forces have been clashing with government forces. But why do you think the civilians are the ones who are suffering at the end of the day, and why is this fighting taking place in Alawite communities?
Yeah, like our elders used to say, that when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. The current problem in Syria is unfortunate, and it is sad that innocent people are the victims of these sectarian clashes. So you have to look at it from two different angles. The coalition, the coalition of the HTS people that are now in power, it came about as an ideological coalition. They have a way of life that they think should be the way the entire Syria should be governed. And they see this moment as an opportunity to establish their power, to establish their authority over the entire Syria. The coastal region, which is being attacked, are people that they term as remnant of the previous regime, and at the same time, ethnic and religious minority. So you can definitely call it what it is, which is ethnic cleansing, and at the same time, the government is trying to claim it is them trying to clear out the remnant of the last regime. In all honesty, if you look at the dynamic of that area, you cannot really explain what is exactly going on. The only thing we can see right now is that innocent civilians are being killed. Most of them are Christians, the Alawites, the people who don't support the current HTS government. And it's like the government is claiming that they don't have hands in it and that they are going to investigate and bring anyone involved to book. But if you look at it, there are still people who support the government doing the atrocity. At the same time, you have to look at the issue of influence of Turkey, because the Turkey have issues with the Kurds, right? And if the government, which is somehow being supported by Turkey and by some other neighboring external factors, is doing things that they don't even like, they cannot really condemn the government, because in the end it becomes the issue of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the current situation in Syria is delicate, is hydra-headed, too many foreign influence, and at the same time the government is trying to find its footing in controlling the entire country.
When you keep saying, the Syrian government, the HTS government, I do remember that they really do not have full control of the country because of the infiltration of other rebel groups and then, other religious Islamist groups that are militant in nature, which believe that their own version of Islam, of course, should be the one that should stay in Syria. It's hard to imagine, the problems facing leader Ahmed al-Shara. He really doesn't have any allies at this time, and that's because the Bashar al-Assad government was on for a long time. Their real friends, I think, are far away, Iran and Russia. So who can he turn to now for help in dealing with a crisis such as this?
The only people he can turn to are those condemning him right now, which are the European Union, because those are the one who welcomes him when he first marched to Damascus. After the fall of Assad regime, we can clearly see from the information coming out of the EU to come to conclusion that they somehow welcome him to lead the country. So those are the ones we can technically call his allies. But at the same time, I don't think the EU will stand with the HTS government in killing minorities, because technically that is against the beliefs and the norms of European Union. So I'm smelling something here, and I think a new change is coming to Syria. It's looking like this HTS government is not going to last, and who is coming after them is what we don't know, because if the whole world seems to be like less concerned about Syria since the fall of Assad regime, and every attention is on Ukraine. And when the new government came into the United States, which have a different ideological pursuit, which is different from the previous government, it's like Syria is just another country that nobody really care about. So I don't know where the leader of HTS will turn to internationally as ally, but the next couple of days should let us see, we determine what is going to happen next. By this time, I think there should be a United Nations resolution. Maybe they are going to send peacekeepers to Syria, or how to protect the minorities and the Christians in that country. I don't know how the world is going to go about it, but I think a bigger problem is brewing in that region.
You're right about a bigger problem brewing in the region. In fact, when you mentioned the UN, I remember the resolutions in the UN regarding Ukraine have still not been respected or carried out. So I really wonder how much of an impact the UN would have in a situation like this. But, leaders have already condemned the violence. We heard from the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio condemning the violence, but then declaring support for the Alawites, the Christians, minority groups in Syria. You also had David Lammy, the UK Foreign Secretary, also condemning the violence and saying the government really needs to rein things in. And then the UN agency, UN Human Rights Chief, also asking Syria's leaders to rein things in as well and provide some leadership at this time. These are not friends of Syria. I mean, they have treated Syria as a pariah. And even though, they seem to be declaring their support from afar, I wonder how much of an impact, their words really have on the situation on the ground, considering that Syria has been existing long before, any of these leaders even got on board, because they're relatively new, I would say, to the situation in Syria. What impact do you think, the things that they're saying, the calls and all of that, you really haven't heard the U.S. investigate much into what has been going on, or even invest in much of what has been going on in Syria? There have been much more bigger problems, the Gaza situation and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I don't really think what matters, because in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of red line being crossed by different group and crisis across the world. So people don't really believe in the words of politicians anymore. But the main problem in Syria is that there are many, let me say, external factors playing in, okay? So you have a side of that country that is loyal to Iran. You have a side of that country that Turkey have interest over, and you have side of that country that that get help from the Western world during the fight against the regime of Assad. So you have all these different ideological groups with one mission, which gave them something to fight for, which was Assad must go. Now Assad is gone. Everybody is like back to their shell. So the only thing that brought them together is no longer existing, meaning they've become enemy of one another. So it doesn't matter whatever the world leader says, whatever Macron says, the situation is going to continue unless somebody stand up to really put boots on the ground to stop what is going on. Don't forget that after the decimation of Hamas and Hezbollah, Israel moved to certain part of Syria that is still under occupation of Israel.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Israel is still watching what is going on in Syria because they don't want it to spill over to their own border as well. So you have Turkey that is having issues with the courts in Syria, right? Which also have interest in that. So in the end, you have different countries who are pulling the string from outside, and everybody's trying to protect their interest. And the question now is this: what is their interest? Are they going to split up Syria to multiple countries, or are they going to bring everybody back to the table and let's form a government of national coalition?
So this is a topic we really cannot exhaust today, unfortunately. But I'm glad that we at least have scratched the surface. We'll wait and see. I do have my concerns about Syria, but I guess we'll discuss this much later as we see things progress in the country. Thank you again, Adetomiwa, for joining us on The World today.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Welcome back. It is March 10th, the Commonwealth Day, in which the organization is celebrating with festivals, fairs, and faith-based services. The theme for this year is Together We Thrive, bringing together 2.7 billion Commonwealth citizens across the 56 member countries in celebration of shared values and the pursuit of a common future. We had a chat, a brief one. My colleague, Mayowa Adegoke, spoke with outgoing Secretary General Patricia Scotland about, her time in the Commonwealth. You can watch more of this on Diplomatic Channel. But she also had a chance to mention, give a few advice for the incoming Commonwealth Secretary General, who it will be the second woman to succeed, then take this position, Shirley Ayoko Bochwe, the Ghanaian Foreign Minister, who will be taking over from her.
Speaking of just how much work is left to be done, obviously you're handing over the baton to Honourable Shirley, I believe.
Yes,
to
absolutely.
Carry on the work. What is your advice to her, and what kind of Commonwealth do you see in the foreseeable future?
Well, I think we have a very dynamic Commonwealth, a smart Commonwealth, an agile Commonwealth, a digitally informed Commonwealth, an AI-enabled Commonwealth. I think that there is such a lot of genius within our Commonwealth because we're like a petri dish. We have the developed, the developing, the small, the medium, the large, the island states, the landlocked states, you name it, we have it within our family. Every race, every religion, every region, literally the sun doesn't set on our Commonwealth. So I think the Commonwealth can become the fulcrum which enables us to address the problems that we face globally together and come up with the solutions that are likely to work. That's been our history, and I think that is our future. And I am so encouraged when I think about the work we're now doing on AI. We have just delivered a Commonwealth legal framework for model law for dealing with virtual assets. The FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, believe that this is the global model which can be used to regulate virtual assets. Nobody else has done that. Why did we succeed? One, it was pro bono, and two, we had everybody. We had regulators, we had lawyers, we had financiers, we had designers of it. Everybody, big, small, was around that table, and they jointly committed to come up with a solution. So I think that going forward, the Commonwealth can continue to do what it's best at, convening people who are brilliant to do great things and enabling the genius within the Commonwealth to come out. And in fact, one of the programs that I created last year was called Genius, and it's using the geospatial experts from across the Commonwealth to come together to come up with some of these analytical solutions to the global problems that we're going to face on climate. So I think there is masses still to be done. I hope that I have created a platform, a baseline, from which my dear sister Shirley will just fly. And I'm sure she has the wings to do it, and I hope that I've helped to build a foundation with the relationship that we have with all our leaders. So my advice to her, stay close to your leaders, listen to them, believe them, because I have found that by listening, I've been able to better understand the problems that they face. By listening to the different groups, the accredited organizations, our partners in the UN and others, if you listen carefully, you can come up with the solution and find the pathway by working together and collaborating with all your friends, your associates, the organizations who you will need.
Outgoing Commonwealth Secretary-General Patricia Scotland, she will be leaving office by the 31st of March, and Ms. Ayoko Botchway will be taking over on April 1st. As we end the program today, a violin teacher in northeastern China is captivating social media users by using none other than a green onion to play the violin. Just look at Wang Di performing in her home using the oversized green onion as a bowl. Wang Di says that she was inspired by her children unwinding during the recent Lunar New Year celebration. They'd bought lots of vegetables, and kids used the green onions as a bowl to play during a break from practicing the violin. It seems the air was filled not only with enchanting music, but also with the aroma of those green onions, sort of making you hungry as you play. Her creative pairing of the green onion with the violin triggered a flurry of humorous comments on Chinese social media. Many observers found it both interesting and inventive. That is some story to tell. I hope you have lunch or dinner nearby after playing the violin with an onion. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.